Good morning. I want to burrow a little deeper in 1 Corinthians. In the communion text in 1 Corinthians 11, beginning in verse 17, you see a situation that occasioned Paul talking about the Eucharist or communion. The occasion of it is significant, and it's really important to get the context. So I'm going to summarize it for you as we walk into this one another this morning. You have people within the local church in Corinth, some of whom have lots of money and have resources and have food, and they can get together and they can eat their full supply, and they can have their meal all provided for at the church potluck, so to speak, at the love feast, at the time when they would get together and fellowship, and then at the end of it they would celebrate the Lord's Supper and remember him through the elements. And then you had poor people who would also gather, but they couldn't sometimes provide for their full sustenance. And what you had is a situation where these two groups of people would come and they'd sit around the same table, and instead of the wealthy who had more than enough passing the plate, sharing with those who were less fortunate, they would just indulge and eat their own. And Paul rebukes them. And he says to them, it's not the Lord's Supper you eat, but you're eating your own supper. It's not, you're coming together and you're not focused on rehearsing the gospel where he was given for you. He was self-sacrificial for you. And you're not interested in rehearsing that kind of sacrifice. Instead, you're a hoarder of blessing. Jesus wasn't a hoarder of blessing in the gospel. Instead, he gave liberally. It's in that context that Paul sits down the communion injunction and reminds them of why they take the bread and why they take the cup at the end of this love feast, to commemorate his death, and in that way to be reminded both of the benefits of that death for their own lives, but also the responsibility that they have to live that out in the horizontal fabric of their relationships. They can't just hoard the gospel. They got to reflect that self-giving, self-sacrificing love. It's in that context you get all the way to the end of the text about communion, and we read this way, verse 33. So then, my brothers, when you come together to eat, talking about the Lord's Supper, wait for one another. If anyone is hungry, let him eat at home, so that when you come together it will not be for judgment. About the other things I'll give directions when I come. Wait for one another is directly in reference to this, if anyone is hungry, let him eat at home. In other words, the idea of waiting for one another is about refraining from personal indulgence to the exclusion of another. Think about that. Think about how many times you're impatient and you want to indulge in something. You want what you want now instead of waiting, being patient. It can happen with food. It can happen with sex. It can happen with relationships. It can happen with impatience, even where you get short and clipped with people and you just want to indulge. You want what you want now. Your agenda needs to rule the day. Wait for one another. What a statement of how you reflect the gospel, that you see others as the beneficiaries of your loving patience rather than self-seeking indulgence. So my encouragement to you is follow the injunction that Paul gives to the Corinthians and wait for one another in your life.